But secondly, look at the defendant's description. She describes Alex's philosophy and says, and certainly Alex definitely has an interest in St. Augustine's famous quotation, "Love and do as you will." There's no doubt about it. He has many writings about that. All of them philosophical, but he has many writings about it. And the defendant's story is that Alex told her that basically means I can do whatever the heck I want, whenever I want, I can take whatever I want, it's all about me. And taking whatever I want. Now there was only two people to that conversation where this supposedly happened. The defendant and Alex.
Attorney, I'm sorry.
Alex?
I think adjourn needs a break.
Oh, okay. All right, that's fine.
Sorry.
Nope, that's fine. Thank you.
Just one more lie. That's the prosecution's theme in closing argument. My time is up. Thanks for hanging out with me, but stick with us because Court TV's exclusive coverage of the Keller girlfriend murder trial is...
Welcome back to Court TV Live, your front row seat to justice. I'm Julie Grant. Thank you for being with us for our exclusive coverage of Wisconsin versus defendant Ezra McCandless. The state delivering its closing arguments to the jury. Let's listen back in together now.
There's only two people to that conversation, defendant and Alex. And Alex can't be here in person to tell you that the defendant is lying about that. But you know what? Alex is still here to tell you the defendant is lying. Because Alex tells you it in the journal entry titled Desire and Will. One of the entries that's in Exhibit 697, the journal documents, but one of the ones that the defendant didn't bother to bring up herself. Didn't bother to bring it up because it doesn't support her story. It doesn't support her story on what her discussions with Alex is about. Because that journal entry, and in that entry, Alex is here today telling you what he means. Telling you the defendant's a liar.
Objection.
Telling you...
Objections noted, overruled.
Telling you she's lying to you when her story is that Alex believed in taking. Because desire and will tells you what love and do as you will really means. Love and do as you will means it is an expression of an excellent morality. It is about giving, to give and give and give to the other. It is in fact, and Alex is telling you in that journal entry, it is in fact the exact opposite of the defendant's story. That Alex is about giving. He is not about taking. And finally, the defendant's story on this issue, when you listen to her and heard her on direct and cross-examination, just doesn't ring true. She's on the stand, she's on direct, reads a part of a thing and says, oh yeah, I remember absolutely clearly 100%. Alex and I, we talked directly about that. We talked about it and he said this and he said that, said this and he said that. But when I tried to cross-examine her on some of the entries that she didn't talk about on direct, well, you know, no, I don't really remember that stuff. I don't remember anything about that. After months of time, she's able to, again, craft her story to fit her narrative. Just doesn't ring true. And I want to talk about the book Fear and Trembling. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, this part is somewhat, I think, insulting to your intelligence, the use of this by the defense. Because the defense brought this book out how many times to show you the cover of this book? To show you a cover of a book that's about the biblical story of Abraham and Isaac. And I'm sure many of you may very well be familiar with the story of Abraham taking Isaac out into the desert at the angel's command to sacrifice Isaac because that's what God wanted. And Soren Kierkegaard in this book writes a book about that and the philosophical constructs of that and how that has to do with faith. But they trotted that book out all those times not to talk about the contents of that book because you didn't hear about a single word inside of that book during the testimony. All you saw was the cover because they want to insult your intelligence and think you're going to think because you see a book with a cover that Alex has that has a cover on it that has somebody with a knife at somebody else's throat, that Alex is somehow the one who is attacking the defendant here. The defendant is trying to insult your intelligence. Don't let that happen. And the other thing about that book is the defendant's testimony is, oh, Alex would read that all the time to me while we're having sex, while we're engaged in sexual activity. He'd sit there and he'd read it to me while he's having sex with me. Or remember her testimony as well? Her story is they always had sex in the dark or with a dim candlelight. How is he reading a book to her while he's having sex with her in the dark? I don't think Alex had X-ray vision. He doesn't have the night vision capabilities of the latest iPhones, ladies and gentlemen. And ladies and gentlemen, let's take a look at what the defendant's story says about what had to happen after she stabbed Alex 16 times. Let's think about it. Her story is essentially this. I stabbed Alex 15 times while I'm in the car. Alex then walked away, went over by the trailer, stood around there for a while, said, I need your help urinating. So she gets up out of the car, walks over by the trailer. He grabs her again, and she stabs him another time in the left side. She said her story is she stabbed him again. He then lets go. She trots away to somewhere else. Alex then walks a little bit, takes off his coat that doesn't, by the way, have any stab wounds in the side, even though he does, and takes his coat off, lays down on his coat, well, he's still, got blood running out of his neck, coat that doesn't have big pools of blood on it from that, or the wound to his groin, as he lays on it. She then sometime collects her glasses, goes to the back of the car, her boy in his arm while Alex is just laying there on his coat. Not getting any blood on it. Blood somehow is getting onto the ground, but not onto his coat. She then goes back to the car, the inside of the car. Again, she's bleeding. Where does the blood go? Doesn't go in the car, but she goes in there, somehow rummages around, finds Alex's phone, takes off her other boot, and trots off away. And Alex then, after that, after she leaves, because he hasn't moved yet, Alex all of a sudden decides, oh, well, let's see, I think I better get up from the ground here, pick up my coat, walk back over to the car, get all the way into the passenger side of the car, because that's where his feet are when he's found, and take off his shoes, put those down on the floor, and then take his coat, neatly lay it on top of his shoes, and then proceed to die and fall till he's out of the car. That's what you have to believe happens. And let's take a look at Alex's position that he's in when he's found. Remember, he's sitting over here. He's sitting right here because there, you see where his feet are. Feet are down on the passenger side floor well. He's sitting there. You can see the blood transfer on the seat where he's sitting. How does Alex fall into this position? Fall so that his right arm is wedged into the door. His left arm is somewhere there in the footwell. And his sweater is pulled up on his back. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what this shows you is that somebody tried to pull Alex out of that car. That's how the blood gets here. That's from his neck wound. And transfers there as they're pulling him across, and he ends up getting wedged so that the defendant can't pull him out. That's what that shows you. And that's what that tells you. He isn't going to fall in a position like that. That makes no sense. But you have to believe that that happened for the defendant's story to be true. And ladies and gentlemen, let's talk about the defendant's story after she stabbed Alex 15 times, waiting for that 16th one to happen. What's her story? She's in the car. She's in the car. Alex is over by the trailer, and he says, I've got to pee. Come help me. Now remember, she's in that stage where Dr. Hopper told you, assuming she's telling you the truth, that her amygdala is in control, right? All right? Her amygdala is in control, telling her, not consciously but subconsciously, to do what instinct tells you. The instincts that we developed when we had to worry about large predators coming and eating us. The amygdala is telling her what to do there. She's not consciously thinking what to do. She's not consciously thinking, should I help him, should I not help him? Her amygdala is controlling her. And let's think about it in terms of Dr. Hopper's analogy of a lion comes walking through that door right there, and your amygdala takes over and tells you what to do. Is your instincts developed from when that lion might have been out there regularly eating you? Does it tell you to go up and give the lion a hug? No. It tells you to stay as far away from that lion as you can. Your amygdala tells you to freeze, maybe. Your amygdala tells you maybe to run. Your amygdala tells you get safe. And at that point in time, when she supposedly has been attacked by Alex and is fearful of Alex, she's in the car. Her amygdala is going to tell her, close the doors, lock the doors, you're safe. Her amygdala is not telling her to go up and help him pee. And what about as she's leaving? Now her story is she lost one boot during the struggle in the car, and she takes off the other boot after Alex is laid down. What's your amygdala going to tell you as it decides that you've got to flee the scene to be safe? It's going to tell you to get out of there as quickly as you can. So it's not going to tell you to take time to take off a boot so that you're moving with just in your stocking feet on a 40-degree day. Your amygdala is going to tell you, get out of there, don't worry about the boots, or the other option is put on the other boots so you can get out of there as quickly as you can. But it's not going to tell you to take time to take off a boot at that point. What about the defendant's actions at Don Sippel's house? I think these are important. And they're important because when you're scared, you want help. You want the police to come to protect you, to take care of you. But what is the defendant's actions? He gets to Don Sippel's house. He doesn't ask Don to call the police. He asks if Don can take him to the hospital. She doesn't want the police there. She doesn't want the police finding her there and possibly finding Alex's body because she hasn't had the time to clean up yet. And she can't remember anything, but she can remember Jason Mengel. And she can remember it enough to be able to, in fact, spell Jason's last name for the police. I want to talk a little bit about motive. Now, the judge has told you we don't have to prove that the defendant had a motive. Motive is not the same as intent. But that motive is something that you can consider. And if the defendant had a motive, it's something you can consider in determining whether or not she's guilty or not. And the defendant had a motive that day. And her motive goes back a couple days earlier to March 19th. March 19th, remember, is the day that Jason Mengel met Jenna Van de Zand in a bar. And Jenna talked to Jason about the situation between the defendant and Alex. And talked about the relationship they had. And told Jason, in fact, about the defendant's actions at Alex's apartment where she was in the shower, she came out with just a towel on and told Matt Schreiner, "I just broke up with Jason, isn't that great?" A big smile on her face. And Jason, when he gets home from the bar, calls the defendant and talks to her and confronts her about these things. Now, before that, they were trying to see about getting back together. They were still having loving conversations. They still were meeting occasionally and staying in a hotel with each other and making love. They were still having loving conversations, talking about how each of them want to have children, but they only want to have potentially children with each other. Still telling each other they love each other. But Jason calls her, confronts her with this, and hangs up on her. Defendant, what does she do? She immediately calls Jenna and says, "Jenna, you've got to fix this. You've got to take care of this. You've got to fix the problem you made." Jenna writes a note, leaves it for Jason that he gets on the 20th. And in the note, basically, she says, "Oh, there may have been some miscommunications, but I'm out of this. I'm washing my hands of this." Jason shares this letter, this note, with the defendant. When she shares it with the defendant, it's clear Jenna didn't do what the defendant told her to do. Jenna didn't fix it. And you can certainly understand why the hairs on Jenna's neck had gone up when she had that conversation with the defendant. Because now the defendant knows Jenna didn't fix this problem with Alex. She needs to fix it. And so she wakes up on March 22nd and comes to Eau Claire with fire in her eyes, as Jason described it. And she comes to get Alex
Judge,
to...
objection. Note your objection, preserve it for the record, overruled, may continue.
And when Jenna didn't fix it, she is going to fix it. She's going to go to Alex's apartment, and she's going to go there and she's going to get Alex to admit their relationship was wrong. It was a mistake. You heard that in her own words in the interview on March 24th. She said, I went there, we talked about our relationship. I told him how our relationship was a mistake, it was wrong, and I asked him if he felt the same way, and he said no, he didn't. But she's got to fix it because that's what's standing between her and the love of her life. Because remember that last Instagram exchange between Jason Mengel and the defendant the night of March 21st. An Instagram that's polite, but certainly not loving. An Instagram where the defendant tells Jason, based on her conversation with her father, my life starts now. And Jason doesn't respond to that with, our life starts together. He responds with 2 messages. 1, that's a good idea. 2, no more lies. And then the Instagram exchange ends with the defendant expressing her feelings are still there. She still loves Jason. She still wants to be with Jason by closing out that Instagram exchange with my husband. And Jason doesn't respond, my wife, he just responds, dream wildly. So the defendant's got to fix this problem herself. And the only thing standing in the way is that relationship she had had with Alex. She needs him to say it was a mistake. She needs to get Alex out of the picture. And Alex says no. So she's got to get him to a place where she can make him say it was a mistake. A place in private. Louis Bjork's field. And when Alex continues to say, no, I'm not going to do that, she snaps, she gets into a rage, and she stabs him. She stabs him in the head. She slices his neck.
It's total speculation. Objection. This is total and complete speculation. You're not allowed to speculate.
This is an argument, and I'm going to note your objections overruled.
That's what she does. When you look at the defendant's testimony, when she's talking about something that other people are present for, that other people can confirm or deny, she can't remember things. Don't remember that. Don't remember that, you know. Asked her about the interview with Officer Reeves. I don't remember anything about that. Ask her about talking to the nurses. I don't remember anything about that. Ask her about anything that somebody else can confirm or deny it. She can't remember it. You ask her about things that only happened between herself and Alex. All of a sudden, her memory comes to light. And she remembers everything. That's not the truth. That's a story. Let's talk briefly about the experts. We've got Dr. Mills, Dr. Tillotson, Dr. Tovar, Dr. Benson, Dr. Thomas, and Dr. Hopper. Let's start with the medical experts. First thing that's important is both forensic pathologists who talked to you told you Alex died from sharp force injuries that the defendant inflicted on him. They confirmed the defendant caused Alex's death. And then you heard from a couple of experts, a couple of doctors on the defendant's injuries. And you heard from Dr. Tillotson. Dr. Tillotson, the only doctor who testified here who wasn't being paid to come here and testify, whose only interest, he told you what his interest is. His interest is in his patient and what's best for his patient. All he's trying to do every single day, and all he was trying to do in this case was help his patient, who was the defendant. And he told you and he explained why, and we've gone through why. His opinion is these injuries are self-inflicted that the defendant had. And if they're self-inflicted, ladies and gentlemen, if all of them are, the defendant's lying, obviously, that she's guilty. You also heard from Dr. Tovar. Dr. Tovar on that who says, well, my opinion is they're consistent with being inflicted by somebody else. And that's what he writes in his report. And my opinion is that Alex's injuries are consistent with somebody acting in self-defense. And that's what he writes in his report. And the defendant told law enforcement the boy was carved into her arm by Alex. And that's what he writes in his report. A report that he can't even get Alex's last name right, except about half the time. I mean, puts it in there, I think it was 17 times, he gets it right 9 times, he gets it wrong 8 times. That's the type of expertise that you want to rely upon. But not only that, he writes his report in such a way that it sounds like he's supporting everything the defendant says. But when you actually ask him questions, well, yeah, no, it could be consistent with something else. It could be consistent with self-inflicted injuries. No, it could be, consistent with somebody killing somebody unprovoked. Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, yeah, you're right. She told law enforcement that she did it herself. But he doesn't put any of that in. And especially galling is the fact that he puts in there that she says that Alex carved boy into her arm when he knew without any question that Alex didn't do that. And yet he writes it in his report. What credibility does someone who does that kind of stuff have with you? I submit none. Dr. Benson testifies it's his opinion that she is diagnosed with PTSD, but he cannot tell you the exact cause of that PTSD. He can't tell you what it was from. And Dr. Benson, who gratuitously adds the statement, "I'm not a hired gun," when nobody had asked him if he was or wasn't a hired gun, he just ports it out, actually acted a heck of a lot like a hired gun when, on cross-examination, the state was asking him, does PTSD cause you to lie? And he says, well, that's a difficult question. You got to consider whether it's a lie of omission or a lie of commission. Making it clear, commission, if you know you're lying at the time you're lying, that's not explained by PTSD. When you try to get him pinned down, he just keeps changing and changing and changing the question so that he doesn't have to actually answer that question. That sounds like someone who has an axe to grind in the case, someone who has an agenda in the case, not someone who's just here, like Dr. Tillotson, testifying about what's best for his patient. And then we have Dr. Hopper. And frankly, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Hopper is an expert. His science is very, very well accepted as to what happens. But Dr. Hopper was also not a hired gun. Dr. Hopper was telling you things, and he was being straight with you, and he was being straight with the defense, and he was being straight with the state. He doesn't know what the stress is that started that whole process, assuming it even started, of causing this super-encoding of central facts and not encoding of peripheral facts. He doesn't know what that stress is. Although he did say that that stress could be someone being involved in a murder. That was his testimony. But he doesn't know what it is. And he was honest about that. And he also told you that while certainly her statements and how she presented could be consistent with someone who had undergone a stressful event, he also said it would be consistent with someone who was just lying. And again, he can't know the cause of that stress. So, let's take a look at the timeline. This timeline is important. The timeline of events is important because this timeline tells us right about 1:25 is when the defendant arrives at the scene where she ultimately kills Alex Woodward. And she arrives at Don Sippel's house about 4:15, the time of the 911 call. So we've got 2 hours and 50 minutes between them. 2 hours and 50 minutes between the time she gets there to Don Sippel's and the time she's arrived at the scene. Her description of what happened, her description of getting stuck once, getting it unstuck, getting it stuck a second time, looking in the back seat for something to get unstuck, and sitting on the trailer for a little while, and then going back to the car and the attack that her story talks about. An hour, maybe, at the most, to the time when she's heading to Don Sippel's house. 10 minutes to get there, that leaves her an hour and a half or more yet that's unaccounted for. An hour and a half in here that's totally unaccounted for by her story. And you know why? Because that's the time it takes her to set up the scene. That's the time it takes her to set up the scene after murdering Alex to make it look like it was self-defense. That's the time it takes her to try and get Alex's body out of the car. That's the time it takes her to try and put her blood in locations where she can do that. That's the time it takes her to cut herself. It's the time it takes her to take off her clothes, cut them, and then put them back on after she cuts herself. It's the time it takes her for the blood on her cuts to dry and then get to Don Sippel's house. It's the time it takes her to create a scene. So what do the physical facts, what do the evidence as it relates to the blood, what is the physical facts as it relates to where the blood is and what type of blood there is in various locations tell us about what happened? Well, ladies and gentlemen, those physical facts, that blood tells us that Alex Woodworth is outside of the car when he's stabbed. Those physical facts tell us, as we talked about, that the defendant is behind Alex Woodworth when she stabs him in the head. And then Alex is out somewhere in this area or here where those pools of blood are when the defendant slices Alex's neck. And then Alex retreats to the car to try and get away. He runs to the car, trying to get away, and as he's doing that, he's getting stabbed in the back, because those stabs are through the coat. And he must take off the coat at some point in time to try and get it off. Maybe as he's getting stabbed, he's trying to take it off. And he gets in the car, and he's stabbed in the side 3 times while he sits in the car. So again, those stab wounds are peri-mortem, as Dr. Mills told you, close to the time of death. And we have cuts in the seat of the car that tell us that there's stabbing taking place in there. And that's what the physical evidence tells us. And the defendant then tried to get Alex out of the car, as you can see here, and couldn't do it. That's what the physical evidence tells us. The physical evidence tells us the defendant did this intentionally, that she did this not in self-defense, and that the defendant is guilty. So, ladies and gentlemen, when you consider all of the evidence in this case, it is clear. It is clear beyond a reasonable doubt. It is clear beyond a reasonable doubt that the defendant sitting there is guilty of first-degree intentional homicide. It's time to tell the defendant, no more lies. You're not going to get away with just one more lie. Make her take responsibility for Alex's death on March 22nd. Find her guilty. Thank you.